Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another live stream here on the channel. Hopefully you're all having a fantastic Sunday so far. We've got an enhanced risk for severe weather today. We'll be going over the general hazards and what you can expect up there in the northern mid-Atlantic back into the Midwestern U.S. So let's see what we have here. Looks like my mic is low. I'm going to just turn it up a little bit. Hopefully that doesn't you know what, it might be on my settings side of things. I'll check that after stream. I'm not going to worry about that right now, though. But welcome, Ben. Welcome, SLD, Pez. Let's see, Lunar, N22, Chip. Chip, glad to see you in here. Haven't seen you in here in a hot minute. Livid, welcome to the stream. Christian, Kevin Joyce, and also Jefferson, thank you for continuing your membership as an EF2 member for 4 months now. Greatly appreciated. Also, welcome Proxy and everyone else who's in the chat who I may have forgotten to welcome, or if you're just now tuning in, Tay, Kentucky, Pez, Storm Dakota. There you go. Let's switch on over to our main screen. We've got, like I said, severe weather to talk about here. We're probably going to be doing a briefing today. I don't think this is going to necessitate coverage. It's mainly a big-time hail threat, so I'm not too worried about much of a tornado threat for today, but likely going to see some very large hailstones out there across Pennsylvania, back down into south-central Illinois. So let's go ahead and stop looping this. This is the HRRR model run for those of you out there in Pennsylvania, back into Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. You're looking at the HRRR run. Just to let you know, it is considerably underdoing moisture and it is considerably underdoing instability. So it is a bad model run and it is null and void. So you're looking at the HRRR and you realize it doesn't show the 50 updraft helicity tracks like it did last night. That model run is not actually portraying the environment correctly. So no need to, well, depending on if you're wanting to chase today. If you're wanting to chase today, no need to worry. It's likely going to perform. But if you're the general public, unfortunately, the HRRR is probably going to end up being wrong with an underperforming risk for today. So tornado risk, we got a pretty decent sized 2% tornado risk today, all the way from southeastern PA, all the way back down into southeastern Illinois. Really not looking at much of a big tornado threat today, although I do think we'll see a tornado or two. That highest tornado threat will probably be just around sunset, if I'd have to assume somewhere around sunset, as our wind shear increases, our temperatures decrease, but our CAPE is also going to decrease. So it's going to be maybe an hour window where we'll have that possibility, an hour or two window where we'll have that main possibility for tornadoes today. Probably Maybe the main spot being southern Ohio, somewhere down in here, southern Ohio, maybe in the overnight hours. So that's your tornado threat. Not very high today. That's why the title says, Tor 2 possible, not likely. But damaging winds will be one of the main hazards today. Wind gusts upwards of 75 to 80 miles per hour out there in that red hatched area. So that's where our damaging winds will likely be the highest. And then some very large hail, also a likelihood, possibly upwards of 2.5, maybe even pushing 3-inch in diameter. If we can see a semi-discrete supercell really get its act together, between the 5 to 9 p.m. time frame, specifically from central PA down into central Ohio. And that is your main probabilities for today. Overall, we've got that enhanced risk for severe weather. Level 3 in that orange, level 2 in the yellow, level 1 in the marginal. So if you're in any of those shaded areas, especially in the yellow and the orange, make sure you are hyper weather aware for today, because that is, that's where we're likely going to see our highest severe weather threat, especially in the yellow and orange. Let me go ahead and see if this is coming in yet. Waiting on the new Mesoanalysis. Mesoanalysis is something I'm going to show you guys here. We'll give it about 10 more minutes before I pop that up. And we are getting a new HRRR, which the only reason why I'm really going to look at this model is to see if it's correcting itself or not. It seems like it's corrected itself a little bit on the moisture side of things, but it still seems to be underdoing Cape pretty hardcore. So I think the number one thing, if you're chasing today out there in Pennsylvania, because I know we have at least 2 to 3 people who are chasing today in the chat out here in Pennsylvania, the main thing to watch, you do want to watch your moisture and your dew points, but the biggest thing is your instability. You're really going to want to see if we can get that instability up to 1,000 out here in Pennsylvania. If it actually does come to fruition and we stay at only 500 Cape, like what this model run is showing, then that means we probably are going to see an underperformance of that enhanced risk. But if that Cape can rise to 1,000, maybe even pushing 1,500, then we could be talking about that notable hail threat with upwards of 2.5 to 3-inch in diameter hail today. That's going to be the number one thing to watch, is that instability. And then storms should fire. We're looking at a pretty late threat, not overnight, but definitely towards dinner time and afterwards. Storms shouldn't fire till about 5, maybe 6 o'clock Eastern. First storms to go up should be just north of our main front, elevated storms out in central to northwestern Pennsylvania, roughly about 6 p.m. Eastern. And then if we just pull this out a little bit further, this is definitely underdoing the rest of the event, but we should see even more convection fire back down over here, closer to maybe sunset, pushing 7, 8 p.m. Right along that front in southeastern Ohio into southwestern Pennsylvania. Which you can see the NAM portrays that pretty well. The NAM portrays that pretty well towards 6 to 8 p.m. So that would be closer to sunset. So first storms to go up again will be most likely central to eastern PA. Secondary storms to go up are going to be along that cold front closer to 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And then our last storms to go up will be our overnight threat back out here in Indiana and Illinois. And again, this is 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. So this could be where our tornado threat is maximized if we have any storms around the vicinity of southeastern Ohio. Maybe this shows southeastern Indiana, but I'm really thinking more of southeastern Ohio. Like the HRRR shows, even though I think the HRRR is underdoing the ingredients. I would really think somewhere between central Indiana and southeastern Ohio, at or just after dark, is going to be your best chance for tornadoes. But then again, I don't expect that tornado threat to be very high. Just if we are going to see a tornado or two today, I would say it's going to be closer to dark. That's if we do see a tornado threat today. So let's see what the new HRRR. HRRR definitely is uptrended on the hail threat. These elevated supercells all in here from eastern PA all the way back into southeastern Illinois. Again, these are all elevated. If you take a look at your instability, it's down in here. So you have a lot of gracious day. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't really know. I don't really know if we're gonna see that type of storm fire. I don't know if we're gonna see that type of kind of line of hail fire there. I mean, you do have, I'm sure you have some sort of upper air instability. Let me see if, I guess, I kind of want to use the NAM because that's the other model one that has it, but I would really like to see what the HRRR is portraying here. But I'm not too confident in that actually happening. If we go back to the SPC and their hatched hail risk, and we go to the newest HRRR, that should be in the, yeah. Okay, it is barely in the slight risk, on kind of on that edge of the slight risk and the marginal risk back up here in Ohio, and then well into the slight risk back here in Illinois and Indiana. But I don't know if it's going to be that far north. I feel like the HRRR is firing that a little bit too far to the north. It's hard to say. So we'll see. How about do you think it will be for like the Pittsburgh area? Again, we haven't really realized that severe weather threat too much yet on our model runs. So we don't know exactly how high that threat may be, but it should be, I would expect it to be a bit worse than what our model runs are portraying. I think these models are doing a pretty rough job at initiating storms in that area. So this model run would be kind of the best portrayed scenario. I think this is a bit more accurate, where we see a few supercells and some clustered storms around the Pittsburgh area back into Ohio, roughly from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, and they will be capable of all hazards. But the main threat today is definitely hail across the board, and I wouldn't rule out damaging winds also being a very big issue. But I think hail will be the biggest problem. So Pittsburgh, I'd anticipate 1.5 to 2.5 inch hail in or around Pittsburgh, and you could see wind gusts upwards of 70 miles per hour. That main wind threat, I think, is probably going to end up staying to the east of Pittsburgh if we even see those storms fire up, because like these storms would probably be a little bit more of an elevated wind threat, but they're still not a notable wind threat, like not worth a 30 sig wind. So I don't think our models are portraying our severe threat accurately today. Let me go look here. Yeah, well, we got a new experimental model from our CSU, which is basically like a model runs combined into an outlook. And that really highlights southeastern, south central, all of southern Ohio. It's really highlighting in here. So what I'm thinking is those that we're actually going to see storms fire on that front, like kind of like what the NAM has, but a little bit more to the south than the NAM. And that's what those models are really starting to struggle with. Yeah, like the RAP model maybe shows that scenario. See how the RAP fires storms a little bit more aggressively on that front? I think that's a more likely case scenario. And so if that does happen, then we will definitely see our enhanced risk verify. And I just don't think our models are picking up on that scenario just yet. All right, let's see. We should have our Mesoanalysis in now. Let's go over here. Make sure that's refreshed. Yeah, and definitely lacklustering in moisture. So I do think the HRRR may be starting to pick up on that. There's higher Cape to the north. Look at that. There's almost 1,000 Cape up here into northwestern Pennsylvania, southwestern PA. Like right around the Pittsburgh areas where that Cape's the lowest. But definitely a moisture issue up there. I want to compare that to here. So that's the 18Z model run. So this shows your highest Cape for Pennsylvania would be probably right towards the border, so like right in here. And that's not necessarily true. Interesting. Trying to figure out which one of our model runs is more accurate, because the HRRR is definitely still underdoing moisture, but it looks like you have two sharp moisture cutoffs. So you have your main batch of moisture, which is back in here. Your main batch of moisture is back out in this area. Yeah, back in here. And then you have a cutoff in moisture here where you drop from 57 down to 49. So right in here, you lose a lot of moisture. And then in here, you drop from 49 and you're going to stay at 49 even all the way into Pittsburgh. So definitely a bit of a moisture, lacklustering amount of moisture for sure in here. $1,300 Cape. Yeah, so I don't think the HRRR is right, and I don't think the NAM is right, because I think the NAM has too much cape, too much moisture, and the HRRR has too little cape and too little moisture. And we have been seeing relatively clear skies throughout the day here, so this should help tremendously with helping that instability issue and increasing that instability to a higher level that will allow for severe storms to be an issue later on this evening. But I think moisture is going to keep this from being anything too insane across Pennsylvania. Really looking more like an Ohio day here. As long as we can see storms fire along that boundary, which you could see in 6 hours, we don't see anything along that front. It's actually a front. We really don't see anything along that front in South Central Ohio. So if we could see anything there in South Central Ohio right around sunset, that would be our greatest threat for all hazards. If something does fire, a few tornadoes and probably 3-inch hail and 70-mile-an-hour winds. So that is a conditional, very significant severe threat in South Central Ohio. Yeah, for Pennsylvania, I think the main area in Pennsylvania is going to be kind of north central Pennsylvania. I do agree with the placement of the HRRR on these storms. I do think we're going to be seeing large hail ride that either ride the front or ride just north of the front at about 6 p.m. Eastern. So I do think Pennsylvania is going to see some significant severe weather, but I'm talking mainly for the Pittsburgh area. It just seems like that area is lacklustering in the environment. Because you could see your moisture is a little bit higher back up to the north. Maybe by a couple, 3 to 5 dew points a little bit higher there in northeastern Ohio compared to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But regardless, we're definitely looking at a very elevated profile. Here is your simulated sounding from the newest RAP model. And you can see this is for sure a very elevated profile. You've got a very large gap between the dew points and the temperatures there. A little bit of a dry slot right in there. No inversion. I don't see any inversion here, so I don't think there's a capping. Yeah, no capping in southwestern PA, so at least you have that. Back in Ohio, this does say there's a capping. How much? It really shouldn't be much. I don't see it saying it on here. Yeah, but there really shouldn't be much of a capping out here in southwestern Ohio. The biggest problem is just that dry slot. You can see right in here. See that dry air? And that should allow for large hail. That should allow for very large hail, really, regardless of what storms do. Like, you want to say hi, bye?
Hi, chat. Bye, chat. Busy day today.
Yeah, he's busy. He was gonna help out with the stream, but he decided to just chill in the background.
Yeah.
All right, see you. Bye.
All right. What? I'll,
Oh.
I'll see you for the race.
All right, talk to you in about an hour.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Mr. Hi Bye. Oh no, we won't get a PDS severe watch. No way. No, that's not needed at all. Yeah, so basically what I'm thinking is Central Pennsylvania will be an area to watch. I do think we'll get a lot of large hail here. I do think we'll get 60 to 70 mile an hour winds and maybe a spin up tornado. That tornado threat is definitely on the lower side. And then towards sunset, I think will be our main threat. That's when stuff starts to pop off. Maybe north of the front, back here in Indiana, Ohio, and west central Pennsylvania. That will feature all hazards threat, large hail upwards of 3-inch in diameter, damaging winds up to 70 miles per hour, and most likely not, but can't rule out a brief tornado. And then your conditional threat, 7 o'clock still, right about 7 o'clock on the front. What happens on that front? Does the front fire? If the front fires, that hail threat is going to be very significant, 3-inch in diameter, 70, maybe even 80 mile per hour winds, and then a couple tornadoes will be possible if any supercells can fire on that front. Which right now, I don't think a single model run shows. So right now, that conditional threat is way too conditional for there to probably be an enhanced risk. We have an enhanced risk today, but I don't really see a way how it verifies if these model ones actually are correct. So, 3 areas to watch. 3 main areas. I'll go over it again. The first main area is going to be around supper time, roughly 5 p.m., north central PA. All hazards, with tornado threat being the lowest hazard. The second area will be north of the front, closer to sunset, back up here in Indiana and Ohio. Mainly large hail, also isolated damaging winds, and possibly a brief spin-up tornado. And then a conditional all significant hazards threat from south central Indiana all the way into southwestern PA. So that's 3 main areas to watch. And really, like I said, no model run really shows anything significant for today, to be honest with you. Like the NAM 3K does show a decent threat. It definitely shows hail galore in Indiana and Ohio. Definitely in that 15 sig wind or 15 sig hail risk, maybe even on the border of it too, again. What is, hold on, I want to go see what CSU has for that. See if CSU is a little bit more north than the SPC. Yeah, CSU is a little bit more north. So at this 4 o'clock update here in an hour, we'll probably see that 15% expanded slightly north. More into central Indiana. Because let's just look at this NAM 3K again. Yeah, and you can see that does fire more storms in the 30 sig and in the 15 sig, but it still has quite a few firing in the 5 sig here for hail. And it doesn't look like it fires on the front there. You do get 1 storm to fire on the front in southwestern PA. See, that would be your conditional all significant hazards, including a tornado. I wouldn't say a strong tornado. I think that is extraordinarily unlikely today. But definitely a chance for significant large hail and significant damaging winds and a spin-up tornado if we can see storms fire on that front. You can see the front is positioned here because these little arrows point their southwesterly winds here. And then north of the front, they turn to northerly winds. So your front is right in here. So this storm, right, that was a horrible arrow. This storm right in here, this storm right in here would be your conditional all significant hazards. And then this would be, maybe 60 mile an hour wind gust, 2-inch hail, no tornado threat. So little wind threat here, hail threat, little to no tornado threat, big hail threat, pretty big wind threat, also a tornado threat if storms fire on that front. Thank you, Mesomat, for the $5 donation. Glad to see you in here as well. Welcome to the stream. Glad to see you. Let me go back over to... Man, anybody know what's happening with the RRFSA? I know I talked trash about the RRFSA, but it low-key did pretty well for the last few events, so... I kind of would have liked to see what it has for today. And then down here in Southern Virginia, we're in a big fire risk for tomorrow. It's not like the fire risks you guys get out west, but for us, it's a pretty decent fire risk. Not too often we're in these elevated fire risks. We do see these more often than enhanced risks for severe weather, but yeah, when they come around, definitely pay attention to them in this area. So my overall takeaway from today is I expect big time hail. I expect a brief tornado or two, most likely on that front if anything does fire, and if not on that front, the next best area would be west central PA if something doesn't fire along that front in Indiana and Ohio. And I expect 60 to 70 mile an hour wind gusts. Wouldn't be surprised if we get a gust up to 80. So, yeah, we'll most likely see 60 to 70 mile an hour wind gust, 1 to 2.5 inch hail, and a tornado or two. And then, of course, you do have the higher end scenario, which is, the isolated hailstone up to 3 inches in diameter, the isolated wind gust up to 80 miles per hour. And then talking about a conditional strong tornado threat, I don't really see there being a possibility for that unless instability overperforms in Western PA. Or, yeah, Western PA would be the only spot for that if instability overperforms, and I extraordinarily doubt that will be the case. I don't see a way how that will be a possibility. Because you could see in the case where instability does overperform, you do get these little pockets of a better tornado threat here at 7 o'clock. I just don't see that being possible, so I don't think a conditional SIG tor threat is on the table at the moment. But today is definitely the type of day where you need to pay very close attention to the instability here on Mesoanalysis, because this is going to be everything. Figuring out where that front is, how fast is it, how much cape is, and where that cape is. I am also curious to see if we do get what the NAM says, upwards of 3,000, 3,500 cape in southern Indiana. Back down in here. What does that have? 3,200, 3,400. Yesterday, I think it had 3,700, so it is a little bit down. We're living under a fire risk like every day during the summer. Yeah, over here they're not common, but they're not very rare. If I had to guess, I'd say we see, just a complete and utter guess, we probably see about 5 of those elevated fire risks, and we probably get 2 critical risks for fire every year in Virginia and North Carolina. So not common, but not actually that rare. Yeah, the possibility of 3-inch hail is quite conditional today. It all comes down to, the biggest thing would be if storms can fire on the front. If they fire on the front, that's going to help increase their risk for 3-inch hail. As long as instability favors it, like what the NAM has, like if this model's correct, these 2 storms wouldn't, they would be in the best position to produce 3-inch hail. Would they actually produce 3-inch hail? Well, first I'd have to look at radar, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. But something similar to this scenario may occur, to where we get a discrete supercellular 2 on the front around 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, and that would have the best opportunity to produce 3-inch hail. Whether or not it does just depends on the environment with that cell at that given time. Which, like I said, if this model run is correct, The one in southwestern PA would have the best chance for that. But then you also have other models like the HRRR here, which show pretty much no supercells firing in southwest PA. So the hail threat over 2-inch in diameter is pretty conditional. But I do think we'll see a few hailstones of 2-inch in diameter for today. It's just a little bit hard to say when our models aren't handling convection that well. My confidence in the threat is lower than normal when models are all over the place like they are today. But I do think at minimum, we're going to get a bunch of severes today. I don't see a way how this risk completely is a bust. At minimum, we're going to be seeing a bunch of severes today. So we'll likely have a decent severe weather outbreak today. With the least concern being tornadoes. The biggest threat is by a milestone, large hail followed by damaging winds. And then, like I said, a tornado or two can't be ruled out. But really, the only way we get a tornado or two is if things fire on that boundary towards sunset in southern Indiana, all the way to southwestern PA, like I said, right in here. If they fire along that front, which I can show you again, just in case you missed it. Wait for this to load. There you go. If things fire along that front, this is late. This is 10 p.m. I think if storms fired at 10 p.m. along the front, they're probably going to be lacklustering with instability, so they most likely wouldn't pose that much of a tornado threat. But if this front's a little bit faster, and the front's in southern Ohio at like 7 p.m., 8 p.m., that threat for a tornado or two would definitely be more possible. I'm trying to be careful with my wording because I'm not very confident in that tornado threat, but also wouldn't be shocked if we get a tornado or two if those storms do fire along the front. But like I said, when you have models that are so all over the place like they are today, it's just hard to be confident in much of anything. It really is. Let's see here. Give me a second. I'm going to take a sounding on the NAM in Indiana. Okay. College Dew page isn't going to work for that, so I'm actually going to have to go to a different site. Why in the world did it put me on the NAM model from like 5 days ago? Okay, let me see. Yeah, so yeah, I did notice most unstable cape. That's what's gonna really carry today's severe threat. This is most unstable instability. And that should, we can't go into the future, but that should approach upwards of 3,000 joules near or north of the front, which if you look here on the HRRR, I wonder if that's handling it well. Yeah, you could see the HRRR, most unstable instability mixed with wind shear. That's why those storms pop off there across Ohio and Indiana. So I do think that's going to be an issue in Indiana and Ohio. I do think this is going to come to fruition where we do see at least a couple supercells north of the front late tonight. And most of those are probably going to end up producing 1 to 2 inch hail with an isolated 3-inch hailstone being possible. But the timing on that is very uncertain. And even then, it doesn't show much of a notable threat for Pittsburgh. I really want to know what CSU is seeing. What is what is NATO cast at for today? Let's go to natocast.com. Let's go to March 22nd, 12Z. Okay, NATOcast has a 30% with the smallest hatched area from kind of west central Ohio all the way into southwestern Pennsylvania. That's where NATOcast is relatively highlighting for the highest hail threat. And I mean, the NAM is definitely more in agreement with that than the HRRR. So I really don't think the HRRR is handling this well at all. What about the wind threat? Let's see here. For the wind threat, it has the smallest 30% in southwestern PA. So definitely hail is the main issue today. And I mean, the SPC, if you take a look here at their hail risk, Pittsburgh is nearly dead center of that hail risk. So I'm assuming that they're thinking that front is going to initiate at like 6 p.m. I mean, the RAP has it initiating. The NAM 3K has it initiating. So it's hard to tell, but I think even the GFS has it initiating. So I think the HRRR might be an outlier on its own. All the problem is there's no, like, the RFSA is our third main cam model, and it's not up. It's either down, I believe it's down for an upgrade. No, I do see the reason for the enhanced if you look really hard at like the environment and some of your, unfortunately, you have to use your global models because we don't really have any other cams. So if you look at everything outside of the HRRR, really it does point to an enhanced around Pittsburgh. Whoops, my bad. But I would definitely pay attention to the mesoanalysis here and see what the mesoanalysis shows over the next hour or two, both the 3:15 and 4:15 Eastern mesoanalysis. See what that ends up popping out. But I do think today screams big hail. I could tell you that. You look at any of the model runs, they scream big hail. They do disagree on where, but all the models scream big hail. So it would not shock me if we get a couple hailstones between 2.5 to 3 inch in diameter today. That tornado threat is all going to come down to if storms fire on the front late this evening or tonight. If something fires north of that front, there's a very high chance it won't be tornadic. Because you can see the difference here. This is where your front is. So anything on or south of that line on this model run. And you could see there's maybe, what, 2 storms? 2 storms here that would have a low chance, but a chance to produce a brief tornado. And also look at the difference between your instability and your most unstable instability. So these storms that are high-based and these elevated storms that are way up there at the 500 millibar, really high up into the atmosphere, those are going to be the ones that are able to produce the largest hailstones. Very, very elevated storms. At least this has 500. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the storms that are north of the boundary and exceeding 20,000 feet, those are going to be the ones that produce the largest hail north of the boundary. Which it's not difficult. If any of you guys have tracked weather, you know it's not that difficult to get storms to exceed 20,000 feet. That is pretty dang often. We see that quite often. It is pretty common to see storms exceed 20,000 feet. Unless you're dealing with like a hurricane. Then you may not see many, if any, storms exceed 20,000 feet. Of course, we have a lower level jet. Yeah, it's decent. I wouldn't say it's like crazy, but it's decent enough. I mean, right on the boundary, you're looking at probably a 30 knot jet stream here, 30, 35. But outside of that boundary, no. Now I'm calling everything a boundary. It's a cold front, warm front. Yeah, and you can see here by the Weather Prediction Center, by the way. Weather Prediction Center. The severe storms, ironically, are expected on and actually north of the front. That is the cold front right there, the cold front, warm front. And you could see the majority of strong to severe storms are expected behind the front. And there is a little area where they're expected on the front. This is for 7 o'clock tonight. Or actually, 8 o'clock. Yeah, time change. Still not used to that. So I'm not going to cover today, but I may jump on tonight. I'm going to enjoy watching NASCAR with Lucky. It's Darlington, which is one of my favorite tracks. I love Darlington. And typically it has a really good chance for me and Lucky's driver to win. Matter of fact, they're both starting in the top. I believe they're both starting in the top 5. So I'm going to enjoy that with Lucky. And then next weekend is all NASCAR. I will be busy Thursday. I will be busy Friday. I will be busy Saturday. I will be busy Sunday. I will be busy Monday and probably Tuesday. So next weekend, this upcoming weekend is extraordinarily busy for me. And I believe Lucky's going to be coming up here Sunday. So I don't think we're going to be able to fit a stream in. It would be nice to try to stream like Saturday night so you guys could get to see Lucky, but if I do that, I risk breaking a metal chair, so I don't know if I want to do that. So, yeah, I may attempt to live stream tonight again if I have time to, but content is going to be pretty far and few between until we get to May. Once we get to early May, gracious, May is so much sooner than I thought, but not May, April. My bad, y'all. Not a whole month and a half. I completely forgot April was a thing until we get till early April. I'm very much going to be more able to live stream in April. I will be way less busy in April than I am in March. So I look forward to being less busy. I do still play NASCAR 25, ATR Media. But right now I've been playing the Crew Motorfest because they added a NASCAR free DLC. So I look forward to streaming a bit more and doing a few more videos in April compared to March. which we didn't do too bad in March, just towards the end of March. Like right now, we went almost a week without content in the last week. I apologize for that. The days just flew by, and there really wasn't much to track on weather up until today. So this risk didn't pop out of nowhere. We started seeing it like 5 days ago, but it never looked impressive. I never saw it being an impressive risk. Until last night, we started seeing an uptrend in moisture on some of our model runs, and that promoted the more hail threat. And then, of course, earlier today, the SPC upgraded to an enhanced for hail and wind. But not an impressive tornado threat today, so that's really good. But I do think we're going to be seeing quite the severe weather outbreak today. So if you are in these risk areas, especially the yellow and the orange, expect a lot of severe weather. Not necessarily tornadoes. I don't think we'll see much tornado action. We'll probably see an occasional warning or two. Specifically in the evening and early overnight hours. But I don't think we're going to be seeing too much of a tornado threat today. Biggest threat is by far that hail risk. Big hatched hail risk there. And then that wind risk is also hatched 30% in Pennsylvania. And then we've got a 2% non-hatched tornado risk. So, yeah, like I said, I think the main area to watch for tornadoes is southwest PA back into southeastern Indiana. But even then, that's just the best risk for a tornado or two. We're not looking at like this area. You're not at risk for like strong tornadoes or anything. If we're going to see a tornado or two today, I think that is the area where it's most likely if any storms do form along that front closer to the evening hours. You got work in the morning. Unfortunately, this stuff is going to be pretty much late evening in the overnight hours, so it probably will keep a few people up. All this stuff doesn't get out of here until probably like 2 a.m., but the main severe weather threat will be over about midnight, which is still very late. However, I think at midnight, the main severe threat will be back into Indiana. I don't think Pennsylvania will be seeing much severe weather. I think Pennsylvania's severe threat ends at probably about 10. Surface-based storm is where the LCL and the LCL and the LFC are close to each other, preferably at 850 millibar or less. And surface and temperature dew points are at or below roughly 11 degrees between the two. So anything with a high LCL and LFC and a high temperature dew point spread is going to be more elevated. So if we take a look at this. Crap. I don't think College DuPage has soundings right now. Oh, well, maybe the rap does. So this should have, this should be a good hail threat. Yeah, so this is, at first, it doesn't look too elevated, right? If you look down here, that's not a terrible temperature dew point spread. The bad thing is, though, the dew points are very low. 42 and 51. That is very low moisture content there. But this is definitely a hail sounding because of your your most unstable instability, which I do think this is underdoing your most unstable instability. This has 850. That's probably going to be closer to 1,500 to 2,000. And your lapse rates, for some reason, go the opposite direction, which that is most likely incorrect because this is taken on, like where our slight risk is. And then you can also see the LCL. The LCL is pretty low here. But your LFC doesn't show exactly where it is, but it should be somewhere up in here. So those two are very far from each other, which means that it's going to be more elevated there. And you're also a little bit lacklustering on moisture. So that's actually not the best example of an elevated profile. Maybe southwestern Ohio will do better. We need one that shows more moisture content so you can see the... Okay, this one's much better. This one is much better. There you go. So you've got a low LCL and a high LFC. That is going to be an elevated profile. But your temperature dew point spread is close to each other. So this is still more elevated though because the LCL and the LFC are far apart from each other. And you can see you do have a lot more instability available out here in southwestern Ohio. Still, not the best example of an elevated profile. That's because those storms fire on or just north of the front. So those are very close to surface based. Those aren't very elevated. The HRRR has very elevated profiles because I took a sounding myself on a different site. Why do all of these have good temperature dew point spreads? Give me something that is more elevated. It's because the HRRR is a little bit of an outlier there. If this isn't elevated, it is insane. Okay, yeah, that's... I don't even know what that is. That is... What even is that? I low-key don't... I haven't seen that before. This is, I believe, when the front's past this area, and something has happened to those temperatures in the dew points. I don't even know what that is. Yeah, the best example of a more elevated profile was this sounding, probably. Yeah, this one was probably the best example, but still, something funny's going on with those dew points, man. It's the opposite of an inversion, actually. It's the opposite of an inversion. An inversion would go the opposite direction. Now, your temperatures, yes, that is an inversion. You're correct with that. But your dew points are the opposite of an inversion because it's dry at the surface and then it's very, very moist in the lower level and even near the mid level, and then it starts to dry back up. So actually, none of these are a perfect example of an elevated profile, to be honest with you. Because this is more elevated because it has a lower LCL and a higher LFC. This is an okay example. But again, your temperature and dew point spread are still close to each other. So a perfect elevated profile would be where you have dry air aloft. So you're drying, you rapidly dry in here, and then you go back to more moisture, and then your dew points end somewhere. So like, if I draw that a little bit better, where you have a bit more dry air in the upper atmosphere, and you're a little bit more moist towards the surface. So a bit more dry air over here, and then your temperatures go up like this. That would be a little bit better for a more elevated profile. And then the LCL would be down here. The LFC would be up here. And the biggest thing is your temperature dew point spread is further away from each other. These are too close. These are very close. That's like, what is that, like 4? I think that's 4. 41 and 45. So that's not the best example of an elevated profile. That is like almost directly on top of the boundary. I want to try to get a better elevated profile here because it's really... This should be a really good environment to show you guys what a very elevated profile looks like. Better. That is better. That is better. That is better. But still, your temperature dew point spread is a little bit too close. So your LCL down here, your LFC up here, your temperature dew point spread at least a little bit further from each other. But really, again, you're going to want those to be 11 plus dew point temperature spread. And then you've got dry air right in there too. So this is a better profile. And you still have 1,431 most unstable Cape. So that is a better elevated profile. Still not the best dry amount of dry air in the mid-level. And then still a little too close on the temperature dew point spread. But that is a much better elevated profile than the other junk that I kept pulling somehow. I don't know... I'm a little bit curious on that because I don't know how I was able to pull like a elevated and surface-based storm at the same time on this sounding. It was very odd. And then you literally had like 1 lapse rate. See, these are more surface. This isn't considerably elevated. This is a bit more surface-based, but still your LFC and LCL are far apart. So this is as storms are moving through, so yeah, these storms probably wouldn't be able to go severe. Little storm fired up there already in Pittsburgh, but yeah, we're going to go ahead and end here. Elevated and surface-based storms, they're not an exact definition, but it is, you can it's relatively an 11 plus temperature dew point spread with a very high LCL and LFC, as well as with dry air aloft to promote more of a hail threat and less of a surface-based storm threat. But you are right, like there's not a direct definition to it, but it's roughly right around there. So that's going to do it for this live stream. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Just make sure you're hyper weather aware today. Main threat is big time hail. That's the biggest problem. Greenfield, Ohio. I'll just look real quick. Yeah, just be on the lookout late this evening for some hail, 1 to 2 inch in diameter, 60-mile-an-hour winds, and maybe a brief spin-up tornado. But that tornado threat is by far the lowest. So I'd be more concerned about hail, not concerned about tornadoes. So once again, I will see you guys in the next live stream, maybe tonight. If not, I'm not too sure when. Just keep an eye out. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your Sunday. Thank you once again for tuning in. Biggest threat today, large hail followed by damaging winds and maybe a spin-up tornado or two, especially if anything fires on the front near sunset in southeastern Indiana to southwestern Pennsylvania. So once again, have a great rest of your Sunday. Stay safe. Watch the severe weather. See you in possibly a live stream tonight. If not, in the next live stream or video that I do. Goodbye. stay safe, watch the severe weather, and I'll see you guys in the next live stream or video that I do. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.